Hello and welcome, I'm Kira Scribner, and today I am going to be wrapping up February. February was an interesting month. I have a video talking about depression and consistency, etc., because I did not read that much compared to myself. To some people, 5 books is a lot. To me, it meant that I had a few days in which I read a bunch of books, and then I read an entire book in a day, and then I wouldn't touch a book for 2 weeks. So for the first 12 days of February, I read the Eustace Diamonds by Anthony Trollope. I've talked about this book several times in the last little bit. I think that Lizzie Greystock is such an interesting heroine because she is a heroine that not many people will like. And that is laid out from the beginning of the book. We are told that she has more enemies than friends. And I found her such a fascinating character. I love the scandalous woman. I like the 19th century woman who is clever and cunning, and that is definitely who she is. She is able to perform kindness very interestingly, and yet that does not completely rob her of all integrity and all care and all of those things, but she loves diamonds and she gets into an early marriage, and then her husband dies within a year, leaving her a child and some wealth, and there is a lot of custody throughout the thing. I really love Anthony Trollope. This was my 10th book by him, and I definitely enjoy the setup. I feel like the characters that we were first introduced, I loved so much, and then as the story ballooned, we were introduced to some characters that I didn't care about as much, and this was partly inspired by the Moonstone and how successful Wilkie Collins was with that. And I read The Woman in White by him, and I did not like it. I'm not a big fan of like the mystery thriller classic book. I think that part didn't work for me. Like, I loved when she was just hoarding her diamonds and just being salty about it. Like, that was great. But once you get into like the thievery and all of the things, it didn't compel me as much. So I think that it took me a long time because I didn't want to finish the book, but I didn't want to give up on the book. I am excited to go back into the 4th book where we're going to go straight into politics, which I feel like other people are probably less appealed by that. I like Lizzie Greystock and I want to spend time with her. I just didn't want to spend time with her in the plot that was the book necessarily. I say that all, like, this was definitely like a 3.5 star. I laughed, I cried, I like had great emotions about this book. It's just a very long book with parts of it with elements that I didn't care about and parts that I absolutely love. Like, these characters were great. I just wanted more about the characters and less about jewelry. And from there, I went on and read The God of Good Looks, and I am so happy I did this. This book just blew me away. I really, really love this book. And this is the book in which I have a mini review in my depression video about, because I was reading it and it was just giving me so much joy. And I feel like some of my other reading was caused by the fact that I had a slump because I wanted to read a book like this and I couldn't find another book that lived up to the hype, and I didn't read a book for a while after this. And yeah, this follows a girl named Bianca, and her mother died when she was a teenager. Her father has kind of been distanced. She went to the UK for college, she came back, and now she's on the island and she doesn't have any friends, she doesn't have any community. Her friends from back in the UK have grown distance, and she is working as a journalist online, and she reads in cafes, and she meets an older man, and over a slow courtship of like leaving books and chatting and talking, they eventually start a sexual relationship. And only 6 months into this relationship does she find out that he's married, and he's also a cabinet minister. And yeah, so that's a huge shock to her, and this relationship continues on for 2 years until she is taken pictures of in a compromising position and plastered across all of the newspapers on the island of Trinidad, which is where she lives, if I didn't say that before. And yeah, it's a small community and everyone knows it, and she's blackballed from her industry, and she ends up working as a model, and all of those elements are her kind of figuring out the ways that she's sexualized. And then she meets a great makeup artist named Obadiah Cortland, and he is rude to her at first, and yet she ends up working for him. And their relationship is really interesting because they both have their insecurities and thoughts, and that is really explored through this novel. And I think that Bianca's character, especially with an eating disorder and the way that she sees her body, is one of the best portrayals that I've ever seen. It's very triggering at times, but it feels so honest in the way that it talks about those elements. And as someone who struggled with eating disorders for like 14 years now, it's just like something that's like so ingrained in the way that I see the world. And it's not a book about that, but it's like so effortlessly put in there in the way that she thinks about herself and how comments let her spin and stuff. And it's also a book about her realizing that the relationship she was in had a lot of coercion and control and manipulation, and how she didn't see that, and how the ways in which women are penalized in the press and in society and slut-shamed in ways that men are not for the same actions. And I just think that it's such a marvelous book. Like, it's a book that I finished and I thought about rereading, and I probably thought about rereading almost every day that I finished it. I should just reread it, but I'm like, no, I can't just be in this orchestra of this book. Like, I have to move on. But I'm like, I don't want to move on. It was such a good book. I found this book through watching Ashley from the Bookish Realm's favorite books of the year. So like, if you're looking for great recommendations, like, she's always such a solid recommender. And yeah, so definitely one of my favorite books of the year so far. And I'm really excited for Breanne McIvor to like publish more books and stories and all those things, because just such a marvelous writer who deals with such complex things in such interesting ways. The next book that I'm going to talk about is a book that I read directly after, and maybe it suffered in comparison. Neil Gaiman is an author that I read a lot from. I think this might be my 10th or 11th book by him, and this is a nonfiction book called Art Matters. And I took this from a recommendation of Books Unbound because Raylene was talking about how it like reinvigorated her and made her care about like creativity and writing and all those things. And I was like, I'm depressed, this is good. And it was good. One of them included like kind of a lecture about like art and why it matters, and him talking about his experience of getting into publishing, etc., etc. And it didn't do that much for me. Like, I thought it was interesting, but it definitely wasn't revelatory for me. My review included the words art matters, because it does. And I think that all of those things are great. Maybe if I wasn't so like just not feeling it in the world, I would have felt this book more. But Neil Gaiman, great author. If you're interested in him, or if art matters, definitely give this a check out. From here, I took a right turn. I think that it was a while before I read anything else. And I think I DNF'd the Subtweet by Vivek Shraya in here. I read previously 2 of their novels and liked them. And then this book, I just was not getting into it. It was not the vibe. And then I read I guess this month is me taking recommendations from other booktubers, which I never really realized, like I always do, but this month especially, I was just like watching booktube being like, give me a reason to live. So I was watching a video by the Bookish Leo, and she was talking about how Love Theoretically was the one book by Ellie Hazelwood that she liked, and I was like, sure, you know what I need in life? Something to love or hate. And I started filming a vlog that will probably never see the light of day, but it was fun. And then I did cry. I did laugh and go why a few times. I had never ventured down the Ellie Hazelwood road before. I like romance. I don't like spicy romance, and that is an issue. If you can get me good closed door romance that deals with people in their 20s, I love it. I don't often love historical romance, and I don't love, like, I don't mind YA romance. I can like it. I like it more as fantasy though. And I love just the commonplace of like the insecurities and struggles that you deal with in your 20s and 30s, and I love exploring that. I just wish there was less sex, because that's not the part that I care about. This is actually a good recommendation if you like closed door romance, because there was nothing really spicy at all until about the 75% mark, and then I just like skipped pretty much 2 entire chapters, and that was most of it. So yes, this book is really interesting. It follows a woman whose name I don't know, but she is a perpetual people pleaser. She's always being put down and told that she's too much, especially because she has diabetes, and she's made to accommodate her mother and the people in her life. When she finished her college degree and is now an adjunct professor getting no money, she does fake dating on the side in order to pay bills. So she goes on dates to this guy, to family events, etc. And the brother is tall, so tall, and so muscly, and all of those things. And he stares at her. I just want to read some of the descriptions, because I do think that this book has a great emotional core to it. But I'm just so over the like big, tall, muscly guy. I don't want a man who towers over me. I want someone I can look in the eyes. I'm also not someone who is primarily attracted to people based on like physical appearance. Like, yeah, like I find people beautiful, but like I care much about someone's soul. These are not all of them. I know that there's a stereotype about Ellie Hazelwood loving tall men, so we have some of this. A foot taller than his nearest relatives, all masculine features, a cutting deep voice, hospital switch up, obviously. I do have a problem with the all masculine features. Like, I hate the fact that there's so much focus on like tallness or bigness being associated with manliness, and I just think that that's so toxic. Like, a man does not need to be 6'5" or like busting out of the seams in order to be a man, and I think that we need redemption for short kings. I love short kings personally. As a short girl, like, I don't know. The only advantage a man being tall has ever given me is if they come on to me, I can see them coming, and I, like, in 2 different situations, I have ducked away from men trying to make moves on me because they were so tall. But, like, that's the only advantage a tall man has ever given me. I just think that, like, lots of men are, like, 5'6", and, like, that's okay. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. And I just think that, like, I would hate to be a man reading this and just, like, feeling like they can never be masculine. And I just think that that's just as much as I hate all the body shaming and all the things that happen with women and size. I think that, like, height and weight and, like, all of these things, like, are so shamed about men, and I just hate it so much. Anyways, I'm gonna read some more and make fun of it. Her date is a friend, and she does not see him romantically at all, and he is particularly smaller. So we also have that. And then we have another quote which says, his muscles hulk under his shirt. His hands are stupidly large. Towering over me, I refuse to feel short. There's nothing wrong being short, girl. Our size difference sits somewhere between absurd and obscene. That was all within, like, the first 20 minutes of the audiobook. Like, I'm not even, like, I just stopped writing them down because they just became so plentiful that it was absurd. As I was recovering from my eating disorder in my 20s, I grew, like, an inch or two. So, like, I've been, like, 5'1.5", 5'2" most of my adult life since I was, like, 10 until I was 23, and then suddenly I'm, like, 5'4" now. And that's even weird for me because I'm, like, very associated with being, like, 5'2", and it's weird that my friends that are 5'2", I'm, like, much taller than them now. But recovering from eating disorder and not being malnutrition can have huge advantage, and you're like, this is weird, I shouldn't be growing at this age. I don't really remember this guy's name, but I did find him interesting. Oh, his name was Jonathan, and then his fake name was Jack. There's this whole mix-up because his, like, professional name is Jonathan, and then the name she knows him in the family is Jack, and she figures out that they're the same person, etc., all of these things. But I did really like that he was a man who supported women's rights. We love that. So one of the places in which a man is harassing her, he says, you're harassing a woman who asked you to get out of her personal space. She asked you to leave. Get out of my sight. And I think that that's so beautiful because so often we have men, like, physically fighting and stuff, and I just love the way that he supported her by, like, being like, she asked you to leave her space. Like, it was never, like, just, like, rage. It was well kept, and I really appreciated that. I forget exactly what this is referring to, but I really liked it. It's the bare minimum. The bar is so low you can pick it up and beat it with him. And I think that that is a great line because there's just, like, these little ways where he's like, okay, like, your expectations are so low, like, you should have higher expectations. Even though he's tall and muscly and all those things that is ideal in this world, I do like this quote. The attraction has little to do with how tall or handsome and everything to do with how perceptive he is. And then he says, I can't control what happens, but I can control how I react, which I thought was really nice. This was after I think he freaked out in a situation, and that's, like, a great apology. And then this is a little bit spoilery, but it's to do with something that I really, really loved, which was him talking about consent and stuff like that. And because she's so people pleasery, and it kind of deals with the way in which that has been manipulated by people in her past, you have him say, you have a pattern of doing things you don't enjoy for the sake of others. I need to be sure that we don't fall into that. We can have sex when you're in a place where you can acknowledge and articulate your needs. And I just wrote, write the book on consent, because I think that that's so beautiful. Like, you can want someone and desire someone. That doesn't mean that you should be in a physical relationship with them when you're struggling with people pleasing so much, etc., etc. And I think that it was really cool. There was also a point in which he kind of overstepped and was too protective, and that was called out as well. Like, just because I struggle with advocating for my needs doesn't mean that you can make those decisions. And that was around sex and stuff like that. Like, we still have to discuss this. Like, just because you don't think that we should have sex, we should still talk about that. Even if you, like, need to give me more space or, like, give me time to think about that and stuff, you just can't decide unilaterally that we can't have sex. I don't know if I want to read more Allie Hazelwood. Like, I actually did start one of her other books under the same roof, or under one roof, and it had all of the same aspects, and it wasn't as deep, and I DNF'd it. So that was DNF this month as well. I took this recommendation from Courtney Reads, and it is Somebody Give This Heart a Pen, and this is by Sophia Thakur, and this is a poetry collection. She is a Black British poet, and I really, really loved reading her poetry. Not all of it was, you know, a full shot, because that's how poetry is, but so many of them were so good. And I've been really struggling with writing. I like to think that I'm a poet, and I normally write like about 1,000 words of poems a month. Since about August, I haven't been able to really write more than a few words here and there, and they're not very good. So, like, reading this, like, I was able to, like, take some of her thoughts and, like, write, and I think that that's so beautiful. Like, I love interacting with different poetry and different minds and those thoughts, and, like, how all of these things are shared. Like, I think that so often we think of creativity as it needs to be so unique or like original, and I think that poetry is always community and communication and interlaying all of your thoughts with other people, and I thought that was so cool. So I am going to read some of her poems because that's the best way to review poetry. Beneath your lover's windows, next to the years you left there, we were callousing where we should have softened, which I thought was so good. That's a conversation about immigration and like the idea that like we callous toward foreigners or people coming into country, immigrants, all of this stuff. And I thought that that was like, we're callousing where we should be softening. Oh, so good. This one is about parents, and I thought it was so wonderful. I suppose I grew up like him, with a heart of scars, holding tight to a love layered in loss. Like, look at those words and that wordplay. I especially love alliteration, so I thought that was so beautiful. This one is a beautiful poem, and I have a few lines from it that are not next to each other, but I think kind of paint a picture. These are things that I once contested, and then I just became accustomed to. I got to know the hold that you had on me so well, that hold that strangled out my expectations. I thought it was so just beautiful in the way that like manipulation, abuse, and like all of these things can just happen, or not even in those situations where someone isn't necessarily abusive but just doesn't treat someone as well as they should. And yeah, I just thought it was so wonderful. This one is part of a poem that's talking about being stuck at work and, you know, all of those feelings and the redundancy of doing it over and over again. And she's talking about how she wishes she could slide into 2 a.m. so that I can cry and hurt in peace until I empty myself into sleep, which I thought was just like, again, so evocative, so beautiful. And then the last one is talking about body image and our thoughts and feelings about our bodies. I can't help but plaster potential over every part of me. So yes, these poems are so beautiful. I have another poetry collection on hold by her, which is My Mother Something, which I think kind of holds image to her. I also found it really cool because she's a Christian, I think. She talks about God so much. Like, every time she talked about God, I was like, yeah, like, I don't know, like, it's so cool to see that part of myself reflected in fiction that also reflects mental health and like all of the other aspects of me. So I thought that was really cool. The last book that I read a little bit from is The Art Assignment by Sarah Urist Green. I really, really love her as a curator and all of those things. And she is the wife of John Green, which does not define her, but is definitely a way to know her. And she did The Art Assignment, which like is what made me fall in love with art and like made me so much into a better poet. Like, I can't draw for the life of me, but like listening to her talk about like different kinds of art, like, and doing that daily and like thinking about it is like what was one of the biggest aspects of me becoming reinvigorated with my love of creativity and writing. And I think that I think that I started it because it feels adjacent to kind of what Neil Gaiman wanted, but this aspect really like called me. So I do love the book, but they're small versus the videos. So like, if you ever care about creativity in any kind, like, I really recommend the series of her going through and talking about art and all of those different aspects that I just found so cool. Like, I don't know, it's just become a lifelong fascination from something that I thought that I could never enter because I don't have the correct, you know, abilities to do that. But she has such this openness of like, anyone is an artist and let's talk about art and why it matters, and I just find it so cool. I thought this was a really cool month of reading, even though I did not read a lot, but I had some good quality books. So let me know what you read in February, any of the books that you think that I would like because of these books, and I really recommend picking up some of these lesser known books. I think that they're really good, and I will see you next time.